On a cold February night in 1957, Detroit's most powerful rising politician stepped outside his brick mansion on Boston Boulevard and made a decision that would end his career, destroy his legacy, and define one of the most shocking murder cases in the city's history. His name was Vincent Harlow, and until that night, Detroit believed he was destined for the governor's office. Instead, he would become inmate number 41,289 at Jackson State Prison, another name added to a ledger of men who flew too close to power and were burned by it. To understand the crime, we must return to Detroit in the mid-1950s, a city roaring with industry and shadowed by corruption. The auto plants were running around the clock, smoke poured endlessly from the stacks of the River Rouge complex, and the steady hum of machinery was the city's heartbeat. The American dream had an engine, and it was built in Detroit. Money flowed like oil, thick, fast, and never clean. With prosperity came greed. Political influence was traded more easily than cigarettes on the assembly line. Behind closed doors, city contracts were auctioned off to the highest bidder. Building inspectors ignored violations for the right envelope. Police commanders quietly aligned themselves with politicians who could ensure promotions. On the surface, Detroit gleamed like chrome. But underneath that shine was something darker, a city that believed success justified any sin. In that world, Vincent Harlow thrived. He was young, polished, and dangerously ambitious, the son of a Ford factory foreman who had clawed his way from the assembly line to law school. Harlow was smart enough to understand the system and charismatic enough to manipulate it. He knew how to talk to workers and businessmen alike, to shake hands with the poor and dine with the powerful. His speeches were clean, confident, and perfectly rehearsed. By 1954, Harlow had become one of the youngest city councilmen in Detroit's history. He promised modernization, efficiency, and progress, new roads, better housing, cleaner neighborhoods. Detroiters adored him. They saw a reflection of themselves in his story, a working-class boy who made it big. He was the golden boy of the council, a man who seemed untouchable. What they didn't know was that his campaign promises were funded by money that didn't belong to him. Construction companies eager to win municipal contracts paid quiet consulting fees that somehow ended up in Harlow's accounts. The deals were subtle, layered through intermediaries, and hidden behind layers of paperwork. To the public, he was a reformer. Behind the scenes, he was the very thing he claimed to oppose. For years, no one questioned him. The papers adored him. His opponents either joined his circle or fell silent. But one man soon would. His name was Arthur Lytton, an investigative reporter for the Detroit Herald. Lytton wasn't flashy. He didn't chase celebrity stories or headlines that sold papers. He was old school, the kind of journalist who still carried a notebook everywhere and trusted records more than rumors. His voice was quiet, his suits worn, and his dedication absolute. By 1956, he was known throughout Detroit's press circles as a man who didn't scare easily. He had already exposed embezzlement in the housing department and uncovered a bribery ring inside the sheriff's office. His work earned him enemies, but also respect. If Lytton was on your trail, it meant your secrets were numbered. That autumn, he began receiving anonymous letters. Each was typed, unsigned, and mailed from different post offices around the city. They all hinted at one thing: Councilman Harlow's contracts. One letter read simply, "Follow the money. McMillan Construction. Check the bids." Another said, "The councilman's promises are bought and paid for." Most reporters would have brushed it off as political gossip. Lytton didn't. He started to dig quietly. He visited the clerk's office, combed through city ledgers, and compared public bids. The numbers didn't make sense. Macmillan Construction had won 6 city projects in a year, all under Harlow's oversight, and each contract was inflated far beyond standard cost. Then there were the donations. Cash contributions to Harlow's campaign reported by companies that had no record of donating anywhere else. Lytton didn't jump to conclusions. He cross-referenced every name, every payment. He tracked campaign funds through dummy organizations and found patterns only an obsessed mind could see. The deeper he went, the more certain he became that Detroit's golden boy was not clean. By December 1956, he had a file nearly 3 inches thick. Invoices, bank transfers, handwritten notes from an anonymous source linking Harlow directly to kickbacks. The evidence was strong enough to destroy a career and shake the city's political foundations. Lytton told his editor he was preparing the first article of a 3-part expose. He was cautious but confident. "This is the big one," he said. "Bigger than housing, bigger than the sheriff's case. This could change how this city does business." He wasn't wrong. Word of the investigation spread fast, whispered through corridors and smoke-filled bars where Detroit's power brokers met. By mid-January, it reached Harlow's ears through a clerk in City Hall, a man who owed him too many favors to stay silent. When Harlow heard the name Arthur Lytton, he went pale. He knew the journalist's reputation. Lytton didn't chase rumors. He uncovered proof. And once the proof was public, there was no defense. That night, Harlow locked himself in his study with a bottle of bourbon. His wife, Margaret, heard the pacing footsteps until dawn. The next morning, his charm was gone. His hands shook. He began canceling appearances, avoiding reporters, and holding secret meetings with his inner circle. He ordered his aide, Robert Finch, to find out what Lytton had and how much time they had before it went to print. Finch returned with bad news. "He's got documents," he whispered. "He's talking to people. It's going to run next week." Harlow didn't answer. He just stared out the window, his reflection fractured by the city lights. Somewhere in that silence, fear turned into something darker. Desperation. On the evening of February 3rd, 1957, the streets of Detroit were quiet under a thin layer of snow. Harlow drove through downtown in his black Oldsmobile, his gloves tight around the steering wheel. He told himself he just wanted to talk, to reason with Lytton, to stop the story before it destroyed them both. Lytton's office on Monroe Street glowed dimly through the frost. Inside, the reporter was reviewing his notes, cigarette smoke hanging thick in the air. He didn't hear the door open. What happened next would later be reconstructed from blood evidence, fingerprints, and Harlow's confession. The confrontation began civil. It ended in chaos. When Lytton refused to delay publication, Harlow's composure cracked. Rage and panic fused into a single moment of violence. His hand found a heavy glass ashtray on the desk. One blow, then another. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the small room. When silence returned, Arthur Lytton was dead. Harlow stood frozen, staring at the man who had threatened his empire. He had spent his life controlling every move, every word. Now control was gone. In its place, horror. He staged the scene clumsily, breaking drawers, scattering papers, taking a few trinkets. But it was all performance. The truth clung to every inch of that room. Then he left, disappearing into the falling snow. The next morning, a janitor found the body. Police arrived within minutes. Nothing valuable was taken. The cash box was untouched. The blow was deliberate, clean, forceful, final. Detective Walter Greer examined the scene. "This isn't robbery," he said. "This is personal." Soon, the Herald confirmed that Lytton had been investigating political corruption. Within hours, Harlow's name surfaced. Witnesses remembered seeing his car near the office that night. A clerk at City Hall mentioned that Harlow had left late and seemed agitated. Then came the forensics, a partial fingerprint on the ashtray, smudged but matching. Enough to raise suspicion, enough to end deniability. On February 18th, police arrived at Harlow's home and arrested him. The press swarmed. Headlines blared. Councilman charged in reporter's murder. Detroit in shock. The trial began in March and lasted 7 weeks. Reporters filled every bench. Photographers camped outside the courthouse. Detroit's most famous son was now its most infamous criminal. Prosecutors laid out the motive clearly. Lytton's investigation would expose Harlow's corruption and end his career. They presented the evidence: the ashtray, the fingerprints, the missing notes, the staged burglary. The defense claimed it was all circumstantial, that Harlow had been framed by political rivals. But witnesses placed him near the scene, and his alibi collapsed under scrutiny. After 5 hours of deliberation, the jury returned, guilty of second-degree murder. The courtroom fell silent. Harlow blinked once, twice, then lowered his head. He didn't cry. He didn't speak. The judge sentenced him to 25 years to life at Jackson State Prison. For a man once seen as Detroit's future, the fall was absolute. Harlow's wife divorced him quietly and left the state. His friends vanished. His estate was sold to pay legal debts. In prison, Harlow kept mostly to himself. He read philosophy, wrote letters no one answered, and aged faster than time allowed. By the time he died in 1975, few remembered his name outside of history books and old crime reports. Arthur Lytton's colleagues at the Herald finished his exposé and published it posthumously under the title, The Price of Silence. It led to 14 indictments, 6 resignations, and the creation of Detroit's first independent ethics board. In death, Lytton accomplished what he had set out to do: to expose the truth. Detroit changed after the case. New procurement laws, stricter oversight, and public transparency followed. But more than that, the murder of Arthur Lytton became a moral touchstone, a reminder that corruption always carries a cost. Vincent Harlow's story is still studied today in journalism and political science classes. A lesson in how ambition without conscience becomes its own kind of death sentence. He wasn't undone by a rival or a scandal spun by enemies. He was undone by fear and by one man's determination to tell the truth. That winter night in 1957 didn't just end a career. It exposed a city's soul. If you really disturbed and interested stories like this, subscribe because the next case might be even worse.